So, will Williams be any good this year? It's a big question, and there's not a clear answer yet, is there? So, in this video, before the big roundup video of, what's happening in the F1 world, I thought I'd talk about Williams first this week. So, the first problem with Williams last year was obviously their aerodynamics. So even though the car felt fine when, driving it in an F1 game, presumably it wasn't as good to drive, on track. I mean, I say that simply because they didn't score a single point last year, the first time in their entire history not to score a single point. But the funnier thing was, last year they were closer to Mercedes than they were in 2018 or 2019. So it begs the question, how did they not get a point last year? And I think the real thing is bad luck. George Russell was very close to a point in the Imola Grand Prix, but he didn't get it, driver error there. Latifi probably could have gotten a point at the Austrian Grand Prix, but I think he retired from that. I mean, there were so many retirements early in the season. I feel like they could have taken advantage of that. It didn't materialize, but it could have happened. Other than that, I think the car really struggles over curbs. And I've been testing this for a little while, sort of as a theory. But if you're watching the onboard camera, obviously, maybe not obviously, for those who don't know, I have a racing line that takes me over the curbs all the time. Mainly just to, get as much grip as possible from the curbs and trying to take as much speed through the corner as possible, because others take the curbs, so why don't I? But the Williams struggles with that. It's the vibrations, it messes up the car, and you can clearly feel it losing downforce through corners where you take curbs. Watch me take these next couple corners, and if you see me taking some curb here, not there, I sort of backed off there simply because, curbs. But the next corner through there, I did take the curb and it lost downforce. And when I say lose downforce, I mean it feels like the car is losing downforce. Obviously, there's nothing in F1 that tells you, your car has just lost 10% of its downforce for vibrations. But if it did, that would tell a lot about the Williams. I think the car, the package itself is quite good. It has the Mercedes engine. They've got a better engine than Red Bull, unless we find out that the Honda engine is OP this year, which I really hope it is, but, it isn't. Let's be honest with ourselves, it probably isn't going to be. But the engine is good, the chassis feels okay, it struggles over bumps, and the aero is lacking. I mean, the laps that I was doing in this were probably in the range of early turbo hybrid era cars, which were pretty slow. And, that's partially because I'm not a professional sim racer, but partially because the car was not the best. Now, I actually lost the footage from this, but I do hold the virtual lap record at the Bahrain Grand Prix track. And not trying to brag here or anything, but when doing that lap, and I've watched it back, although the footage, as I said, has corrupted, when I did watch it back versus the Williams, the downforce levels of the car that I was driving versus the downforce levels of the Williams were visibly different, which was surprising because, you don't expect to see such visible differences in a car like that, in an F1 car at all. I mean, sure, maybe in GT racing, one car is really far behind the others and you can see it can't take corners so quickly. But not in F1. It's not something that you just see in F1. This car visibly has less downforce. It's not something you can normally see and visualize. For the record attempt and eventual record, I was driving the custom car in F1 2020, and that's how I secured that. And for those who think, why didn't you do it in Assetto Corsa? I'm sorry, but the physics in Assetto Corsa are so harsh, I would never have been able to get that lap record. Anyways, though, let's talk about the 2020 car. I'm quite hopeful. I mean, the livery launch was not smooth at all. And what I mean by that is, when they launched the car, I kid you not, their live stream on their website was hacked. So it had to be delayed, and there was some sort of VR thing. It was supposed to be really cool. It didn't really work out the way we thought it would, but still, a pretty cool car. I mean, it does look like a Heritage Williams. It has some yellow on it, which I think harkens back to the old Camel days where Camel sponsored them. For those who don't know, that's a tobacco brand. And yeah, I think the car livery looks good. If the car looks as fast as it is, then it could probably challenge Mercedes, and technically I think it has some strong points to boast about. Its side pods are the most aggressive in the entire field, and I feel as though the cooling that they've set up is very aerodynamic friendly. I think they're a lot better than what they had in 2020. Will that be enough to bring them up past Haas and Alfa Romeo? I hope so. I think it could do something for that, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% positive on, is that enough? Because in previous years, the Williams car was, strong in the early season, or even strong in the late season, because they've done some upgrades to it, but, we don't know whether this is a false dawn or not, and that would be a real shame if it was. Because, 2014, 2015, 2016, we all pretty much consider that a false dawn with the Mercedes engine. The chassis was good, but the aero was still quite bad. But there are some big changes inside Williams that should make it a better team. For instance, they have a new managing director named Jost Capito. He apparently did some stuff with Volkswagen, and he won them a couple of rally titles in some of the most difficult rally cars to drive ever. And props to him for getting those things to work. I can't seem to make it work on rally video games, rally simulators. It's a bit of a shame. But supposedly he's a great team manager. So I'm really excited to see what he can bring to Williams because, I think every single Williams fan is expecting a lot from him. Is he going to be the difference? I don't know. Is Duralton Capital, the new owners of Williams, are they going to be the difference? I still don't know, but I think these new things that have been put in place, plus the new development work on this year's car, will lead up to a car that's certainly better than last year's. And if it isn't, we've got a problem. But if it is, then, it proves that this new structure that they've set up at Williams works, because this new car has been designed under that structure. And next year's car, more importantly, the 2022 F1 car, has been designed under that structure. Now, let's take a look at the car. Soon enough, you'll be able to see that. It's on the next set of videos. You'll see it soon enough. It's the 2020 car in qualifying mode, and that'll be similar to what the 2021 car will be through most of the season, pretty much. Because, if we assume, if we assume that this year's car is going to be about as fast as last year's car, because if they make big gains, last year's car was not the fastest, they could be in the thick of the midfield. Now, I predicted them to be about 7th place. I also predicted Ferrari to be behind them. Now, everybody's saying Ferrari's made up all these gains on the engine, but I doubt it. I don't think they have. And as long as that's true, then in that case, I think that Williams is pretty safe where they are. Obviously, they shouldn't tread water. They should punch forward and try to, get up to the next place, which would be more frequent points and podiums, sort of like what Renault is doing. But, at least if they can start beating the Ferrari teams on a regular basis, points-wise, then they're golden. Because, that's going to be the first step, and then the next step will be getting up to midfield leaders. And I think, in a couple of years, that could definitely be them. The new regulations favor teams like Williams and McLaren, because, you have teams like that, and the job, or what's favored about it, is that you have, a team that is not manufacturing an engine, which is cheaper, cost cap era, that's good. And then also, the cars themselves will be less complicated in general, but because they have the same budget as the bigger teams, they don't need to downsize anyways, so they're fine. It will favor teams like that. Overall, I'm really hopeful for Williams this season. I think they could do great, and personally, I hope they do. I think they're really close to something great. I think they're very close to a regulation set that favors them. If they ride out this year, they get a couple $1 million of prize money, they're golden. The more amount of money they can collect and the closer they can work to the budget cap, the better. And if they do work at the budget cap in the new 2022 era, they've got it made, really. So I am very hopeful for them. I see a bright future ahead of them, and I'm really excited. Anyways, if you did enjoy this video, please consider liking, subscribing. Lots of hard work goes into these Technically F1 videos and podcasts. New podcast coming soon, and if it's Tuesday, it's probably already come out. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.